So, in addition to wearing my Red Sox hat today, I'm also good. Let's just imagine for a second that this is also my organizational psychologist cap that I just put on, and that's the capacity I want to speak to you in right now. And this advice is for anyone that is ever planning on having a job in any capacity and working for a boss that is not yourself. I don't care who you voted for. Makes no difference at all what your political persuasion is, what your beliefs are, all that stuff. This just is advice for people going out into the world and saying, I want to make a living doing XYZ. Here it is. Don't ever go to work for a boss that cannot handle disagreement, that expects you to be in lockstep with everything they say and think and believe, and that's true inside and out of the office. They cannot handle people who see the world differently than them. Listen, there is a very specific psychological profile. It's called, I use the DISC model when I'm doing work styles and stuff like that. Not everyone uses DISC. I know a lot of people talk about the Big Five. I'm not as familiar with the Big Five. DISC is something I use because it's frankly the easiest thing that I have found to teach in the known universe in a way that people actually remember. When you're using the DISC model, I'm not going to go into that fully here, but there are essentially like 4 primary styles. There's the dominant, there's the influencer, there's the steadiness, and there's the conscientiousness. DISC, that's how we get the DISC style. Now, the style that cannot handle disagreement at all, ever, is the conscientiousness style. The conscientiousness style is really, really valuable. It's a very detail-oriented style. They also are very attuned to process. These are like your accountants, your IT people, your programmers, things like that are going to have the conscientiousness style. And typically, they see the world in terms of there being a right way and a wrong way to do things. Now, that's a strength that the profile has, but every profile can be both a strength and a weakness. And the weakness that this profile has is that they get so rigid in their thought process, they get so rigid in it that they very literally can't see that there's often more than one way to solve a problem, often more than one way to meet a goal, get to an outcome you want, all those good things. They get so wedded to the idea that it has to be their idea and their way of doing it and their process that they end up pissing a lot of people off. Now, I'm not going to say that people with a strong C style don't make good bosses, because they absolutely can make good bosses. They can be amazing bosses. People of any different work style can be great bosses. However, what they have to learn how to do is to go outside of their comfort zone. Yes, they have to become comfortable being uncomfortable, which is a good thing, except when it's being used in the vein of social justice, when they're trying to indoctrinate you into something. But most of the time, like, if you're pushing outside of what your natural inclinations are, you are going to feel uncomfortable. And so if they can learn how to do that, if they can learn to coexist with people who see the world differently than they do, they can be great bosses. They can be just fine. But Jake Tapper is not an example of someone who I would say is going to be this great boss. And I am basing that purely on his own words of something that he tweeted earlier this morning that absolutely got my blood boiling. Jake says to his millions of followers, I truly sympathize with those dealing with losing. It's not easy. But at a certain point, one has to think not only about what's best for the nation, peaceful transfer of power, but how any future employers might see your character defined during adversity. I'm sorry, what? Did Jake Tapper really just threaten people who want to see the legal process play out by saying, oh, well, you shouldn't speak up about it, you silly, silly Trump supporters, because you're never going to be able to get a job again because I, Jake Tapper of CNN, say so. Did he really just say that? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. An anchor, or like whatever the heck his role is, anchor reporter, I don't even know exactly. Someone prominent on CNN that is on TV in front of millions of people just used his magic platform to threaten average, everyday people who dare to speak up for themselves, who dare to question what they see happening. Now, I made my position clear on this issue, but just in case you haven't watched one of my videos in the last couple of days, and Lord knows you may not have, is that here's how I see it. I want this process to play out. I think that it very realistically could go Biden's way. I think it very realistically could go Trump's way. I hope it goes Trump's way. I do. That's the person I want to see for the next 4 years. If it went Biden's way, though, would it be the end of the world? No, absolutely not. My biggest concern is that I want to see this investigated. I absolutely believe there's ample evidence that fraud took place, and we should be investigating these things for the good of the country. Because if half the country believes that the election was a sham, that is not good for us. And frankly, part of me is like, I think half the country is going to believe that either way it goes, and it may not make a difference, but we should at least go through the process of investigating this, and there is ample reason to do so. And what Jake Tapper is doing here, well, he's calling for unity. Well, he's calling for people, we need to come together as a country now that we've won and we voted your guy out of office. And don't you dare speak up in support of him, because if you do, you'll never be able to get a job again. What he's doing is absolutely reprehensible for anyone in a platform. This is one of the things I've been complaining about lately in terms of people who have these platforms, whether it be on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or YouTube. People who have these platforms need to behave responsibly. They need to be responsible with what they are telling their audience. And Jake Tapper is absolutely not doing that. And the fact, I'm sorry, I'm not advocating for anyone being canceled, but the fact that CNN allows him to go and threaten the jobs of everyday average Americans, make them think they don't have any choice but to keep their mouths shut if they disagree with what he has to say, that is reprehensible. The biggest message that Jake Tapper is sending in this little tweet is not that frankly, it is that you should keep your mouth shut unless you agree with me, but it's actually much more subtle than that. When I look at this as an organizational psychologist, when I see someone saying that if you speak up against me, that is going to jeopardize your ability to get a job in the future, the very first thing I think of is, I don't want to go to work for Jake Tapper. I want to go to work for Jake Tapper at all. Not for all the money in the world would I go to work for him. You could give me $1 billion right this second, and I still wouldn't go to work for him, because that would be an absolute nightmare. You never, ever, ever go to work for someone that cannot handle disagreement. And I'm going to tell you this too, folks. Listen, I know that journalists live on Twitter. They live and breathe on Twitter, and they think it is the end-all be-all. But very few of the American people actually use Twitter on an active basis. An exceptionally small percentage of the overall population actively use Twitter. People have asked me, Carlin, do you still have a business? Do you still do work? Do you still actually act as a psychologist? Yeah, I do. You know why? Because my business was never built on social media. It was never built on social media. It was built by word of mouth. Now, has my business been impacted by some of the stuff I've tweeted and some of the videos I posted? Yeah, of course. It's actually been more impacted by little socialists on the internet emailing the very few clients that I have publicly listed and saying, did you know she was in a PragerU video? That's actually been the most impact, but it hasn't been Twitter. It hasn't been Facebook. It hasn't been Parler or any other social media thing. It hasn't been YouTube. That's not what's affected my business at all, because the average person doesn't look at it. So do not ever allow Jake Tapper to scare you into not speaking up for yourself and not saying what you think. We have all been given the gift of expression purely because we're here, purely because we're alive, purely because we exist on this earth. That gift is yours. You didn't have to do anything to earn it, and you certainly don't need Jake Tapper's permission to use it. All right. I just had to rant about that. I'm sorry. This really, really, really pissed me off. It is one thing to express your opinion. It is another to threaten the livelihoods of average, everyday people who, frankly, are probably working a heck of a lot harder than him for the millions of dollars that he makes every single year. This is disgusting. And I'm not advocating for him to be canceled. I would advocate for him to get a stern talking to by his boss to cut this crap out, because this is not endearing to anyone. These people say, oh, let's unify, let's bring the country together. Obviously, they don't mean it, because they're actively trying to shut up people who don't agree with them. That is not what unity looks like, and it's not what diversity looks like either. Diversity of thought, diversity of opinion in the workplace and in life is the element of diversity that actually matters the most. And these people, if they had their way, would stifle it. All right, guys, that's all I've got for this one. If you enjoyed this video, I do content on the daily or sometimes several times a day around different issues with news, politics, culture, all that good stuff, anything that I really feel like talking about or ranting about as the case may be. So I would ask if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications, all that good stuff. That's all I've got for right now. I'll see you soon.